Residents of Massachusetts, I need you to brace yourselves because what we're going to talk about today, I think, is going to leave you questioning the validity of our elections to their core if you're not already questioning them, right? What I'm going to share with you is data. I'm going to share data because you deserve to know what is going on behind closed doors. You deserve to know the truth. And we realistically can't wait any longer to clean this mess up here. So let me start by saying that in 2022, there were over 750,000 errors in our voter rolls. And these are errors that could obviously impact or silence your voice because you're not getting a vote or something is happening, right? To put things into perspective, 750,000 plus is more than the people that live in Boston. You know, it's ridiculous. And these aren't just numbers. This is something that is fundamentally broken within our state's voter rolls. And if you're a resident here, beside the audit, I think this should be one of your biggest concerns heading into future election cycles. You know, it's a direct attack on your voice. It's a direct attack on your vote. And it really has, at least me, and I'm sure probably you as well if you're watching this, questioning the trust in our democracy. Let me break it down for you because it's pretty simple, but the results are devastating. So Massachusetts, they have a massive problem with this voter registration. It's a huge problem. And to its core, again, it's simple, but at the same time, it produces very problematic results. Based on the data that I was presented with over the weekend, which I'm going to ask the gentleman if I could link this data to you. I don't know for sure right now, but I'm going to check. Our voter rolls, they have multiple errors that essentially could compromise the integrity or the true integrity of our elections. And I'm going to share this with you here today. But I will tell you, this is not some minor glitch or a one-time slip-up or anything like that. It is a systematic failure that's persisted across election cycles. And it's really a profound disservice to every resident who believes that their votes and their voice should matter. So here's how this happened, okay? I got a call on Friday afternoon. It was around 1 o'clock or 1:30 from a gentleman. His name is Jeff Cohen. He is the co-director of two election validity groups in Massachusetts. One is MA4 Fair Elections, and the other is the United Sovereign Americans of Massachusetts. Now, what they do and what they have is basically a group of data analysts and grassroots investigators who thoroughly comb through this data. They go through the voter rolls in Massachusetts, and again, they found ridiculous amounts of registration violations. So each one of those, when you think about it, could be a potential felony here. Here's some of the data for you. In 2022, they uncovered over 751,000 voter registration violations here in Massachusetts. Out of that 751 plus thousand, that included 25,607 duplicate registrations, 132,000 plus invalid or complete addresses, and almost 19,000 deceased individuals that are still on the voter rolls. This is just some of the numbers. There are more. And just so you understand what's really happening here, when you have let's say a duplicate registration, what that can do is lead to double or duplicate voting. Invalid addresses could misdirect ballots or, let's say, disenfranchise the voters. And of course, deceased voters, there could be some levels of fraud there when it comes to deceased voters. Now, I'm not pointing the fingers necessarily at these individuals, but what I am pointing the finger at is the system and demanding that system that works for the people, not against them, at least right now. I think that should be demanded where it's accurate, right? We should demand accuracy in these things. At the very least, at the most simplest of this should be very simple. Okay, we're living in 2025 here. All right, data should not be corrupted. Okay, so The scope of this crisis, if you want to call this a voter roll crisis or a voting crisis, whatever it isn't just speculation, because also I did a little bit more research. And back in 2012, the Charitable Trust, they did a study. And that study showed that 24 million voter registrations nationwide, 1 in 8 were invalid or substantially inaccurate. So if you take that data set and you look at Massachusetts, it would fit right into that pattern. And the reality is this isn't just a national trend. It's a local disgrace, because in the 2022 midterms, the state counted 87,000 plus more votes than voters who participated. So how the hell does that happen? How does this happen? It's unbelievable. You know, are they simply clerical errors, or is it because of outdated technology? The fact is, I personally don't care, and you shouldn't care either, because the reality here is the results are the same. In the results for me, and what I think about, is this a system that we can trust? What's more concerning is that history shows that this is not a new problem. It's a trend of problems. Back in 2004, Massachusetts faced similar criticisms for outdated voter rolls during the presidential election, and they had reports of thousands of inactive or erroneous registrations. Now, 2 decades later, we still have the same problems, but they're magnified because the scale keeps on getting heavier and heavier. It's really jaw-dropping, because you have a trend of, let's say, corrupted voter rolls that just keeps on getting more and more and more large. That's the problem here. And when you think about it, you know, Massachusetts, I think, has or has this facade of a lot of pride, of this like cradle of democracy. But what's happening here is not that. We should be setting the standard in the United States, not the opposite. That's my opinion. I feel like we're stuck in the past here, and it's our residents that are the ones that have to pay the price. I did a lot of thinking about this over the weekend. And you know, this isn't some levels of like a bureaucratic headache that affects only people that are like data nerds like me, or whatever you want to call us, that really respect data, because data is very black and white. It's a disservice to every Massachusetts resident who expects their government to get the very basics right. You know, imagine showing up to vote only to find your name isn't on the list because of a typo, or worse, you discovered your vote was canceled out by some levels of a duplicate registration, right? Picture somebody coming here and it's their first time voting, and they get turned away because the system didn't update their address or something of that nature. And these aren't hypothetical situations. These are real stories from 2022 during the midterms, when hundreds of voters were denied their rights due to registration errors. And I believe that it was even reported back then by the Globe, which is really unbelievable to me that they even reported on this. So you know it's a somewhat relevant issue if they're willing to cover that. Look at it this way. Here's another one. So imagine there was like $750,000 or 750 errors in your bank account, right? Or like, let's say, duplicate transactions, funds tied to people who passed away. You would probably demand some levels of accountability or transparency, right? Our roles should deserve, they at least deserve the same level of scrutiny. That's my opinion, because they hold something that's even more powerful than money. It's our democratic power. That's our voice, right? To elect these people in. And when that system fails, it's not just a number on a spreadsheet. It is a betrayal of the people who rely on it. And Massachusetts has something around 4.8 registered voters. And those voters, now, after watching this, you're going to be sitting there wondering if your voice is even going to get heard, right? If those votes are even going to matter. That's the point of this video. Now, you might be sitting there thinking like me. The one thing that was on my mind over the weekend was like, who and how? Like, who is responsible for these things? Who is the one responsible? And I'm not solely pointing the responsibility on this one person, but the Secretary of the Commonwealth is William Galvin. He is also the state's top election official. And his office, it's resisted releasing statewide voter rolls. And what they try to do is claim that Massachusetts law protects this data as non-public, which obviously sounds like an excuse to me, at least. Another thing was that the National Voter Registration Act, which is a federal law, they mandate that states make voter records available for public inspection and, I guess, public consumption. This isn't about exposing your private details. It's about ensuring that there's transparency. When these officials block access, they're doing the exact opposite. They're not protecting us. What they're doing is protecting themselves. That's why these groups, these grassroots groups, they filed a federal lawsuit against Galvin, and that was in the beginning of August. I think it was the 5th or the 6th of 24. And what they did is they are demanding compliance. And guess what? I'm sure that those people are not alone. I think that Galvin should comply with this. There's been a similar lawsuit that was filed. I was reading, I believe it was Maryland, South Carolina, and Maine. And guess what? Every single one of those lawsuits, they won. And what they did is they forced the people to open the books. Guess what's happening here in Massachusetts? Of course, they are just digging their heels in the sand. They keep on doing the same thing. Look at what happened with the audit. That's another perfect example. The numbers, I think they tell the real story. So the 2022 polling stations across Massachusetts reported that voters were turned away due to registration mismatches. And of course, these are ordinary people caught in a system that just, I don't know if it's corrupt or just couldn't keep up. I'm not sure which of the two it is. Maybe it's both. And United Sovereign Americans, they flagged over 29 million registration violations across 21 states in 2022. So not just Massachusetts. So you could say that Massachusetts is not an outlier here, but it is a glaring example of a larger crisis, a more nationwide crisis. But again, as a state that prides itself on progress and being so progressive, we should be ashamed to be a part of that statistic. Every error risks silencing a voter or alternatively amplifying a mistake. So when that happens, democracy is stumbling and it cracks. That's what happens here. Now, you might be thinking a crisis like this, like I was, would be dominating headlines, okay? But the only thing that I could come up with this is that it may not be trendy enough for, let's say the Boston Globe or local stations to pick this up or touch on the subject, right? I think that, in my opinion, the election integrity might be maybe too complex or too data heavy to just draw sound bites from, or too dry to get a whole bunch of eyeballs and clicks. That's my opinion. I'm not sure. But anyway, Massachusetts, they're at a breaking point here because every duplicate entry, every invalid address, every unaddressed error, it just keeps chipping away at this problem and the trust that would hold us together. This isn't about politics or finger pointing here. It's about competence. It's about fairness. And it's about a promise that every vote counts. And clearly, it doesn't. Right? I think that we deserve a better system that continuously fails us after each election. And I think we also should demand transparency and potentially back these lawsuits, I certainly do, that are trying to pry open that data. We need to hold people accountable here. And Galvin should either fix this problem or step aside. That's what should happen, especially if they do not comply. If we can't trust the voter rolls, what else can't we trust here? If you can't trust the voter rolls, could you even trust the results? That's another really good way to put it. It's really unbelievable to me. So I'm going to see what I could do. If I could publish this data in the description below, I will. I'll put it in the form of a PDF or something like that. But I was pretty upset all weekend just thinking about this and looking at the data because, again, I didn't have every single statistic here because it would be very overwhelming, but you could take a look at it for yourself. But overall, the general consensus here is A, this has been happening for a long time, and B, it seems to be only getting worse in a world where technology just keeps on getting better and better and better and better, yet the voter rolls keep on getting worse and worse and worse. It doesn't make sense to me, and something's not adding up. There are some levels of corruption here, and I promise you it's going to be revealed in the future. Anyway, that's it for today's video, guys. I'll see you on the next one. Bye-bye.